of the Westborough Diversity and Inclusion Committee today on Monday, February 28th. Pursuant to Chapter 20 of the Acts of 2021, this meeting of the Westborough Diversity and Inclusion Committee will be conducted via remote means in accordance with applicable law. Members of the public who wish to access the meeting may do so by going to the link that is included in the agenda, the Zoom link. No in-person attendance of members of the public will be permitted, but every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings in real time via technological means. In the event that we're unable to do so for reasons of economic hardship and despite best efforts, we will post on the Westborough TV website an audio or video recording, transcript, or other comprehensive record of proceedings as soon as possible after the meeting. When required by law or allowed by the chair, persons wishing to provide public comment may do so by remote access as noted above and instructed below. The meeting will also be broadcast live in real time via Westborough TV and on local cable on Verizon Channel 28 and Charter Channel 192 and online at westboroughTV.org and on YouTube/Westborough TV. Members of the public who wish to speak at future Westborough Youth Diversity and Inclusion meetings may do so during an open forum portion of future agendas, or they may contact me, the committee chairperson, in advance to make arrangements to speak outside of open forum. To otherwise contribute to the discussion on the following agenda items or to suggest a topic for future agendas, members of the public may send email to diversity@town.westborough.ma.us or call me, the chairperson, Kara Presley, at 508-366-3090. And with that, I will just review the agenda and we'll get started. So the whole purpose of us coming together today, and thank you so much to all of you, 6 of you, 7 of us total, who are able to kind of be here for this impromptu meeting. We're going to talk about the citizen petition warrant article regarding Indigenous Peoples Day. And we're going to talk about what stance, if any, we want to make as a committee on this petition. So we're going to start by inviting Lisa Edinburgh, the citizen who petitioned, to tell us a little bit about the petition, where it came from and what exactly it means, and give us an opportunity to answer any questions for clarification. We won't be deliberating with Lisa, but we want to just understand a little bit more about the petition. And after we've had our questions answered from Lisa, then we'll break off as a committee and deliberate. All right, Lisa, would you mind introducing yourself?
No problem. I'm Lisa Edinburgh, and I want to thank you for allowing me to join you today. I really hope that it will help you process what Article 35 on the town warrant is and what it represents and how it moves Westborough forward in its inclusivity to recognize Indigenous peoples. It is my hope that you will support this article in the upcoming town meeting after hearing more about it, but I'd be happy to also answer any questions. So let me begin by saying that as a Westborough School Committee member, I did make the motion to alter Columbus Day in Westborough Public Schools to Indigenous Peoples Day, which passed unanimously. And when your committee brought it forth, similarly to the select board, I was surprised by the controversy and devastated by their 3-2 vote against your recommended change. I was simply perplexed that the values of the change aligned with the town's vision and mission statements, and yet 3 voted against it. So this failure for what I deemed a moral change to right some wrongs of the past pushed me into action, and here you see a petition in the warrant ready for a town vote. This petition, signed by nearly 100 Westborough registered voters for March 19th town meeting, simply states, to see if the town will vote to, quote, from this day forward, recognize and refer to the second Monday in October as Indigenous Peoples Day, or take any other action thereon. Note that this article is a non-binding resolution regarding the second Monday in October. It does not alter or change Columbus Day in any way, nor does it take the Columbus Day holiday away as a state or federal holiday. Additionally, it does not require any action by the town, but may be considered as the town updates documents that reference the second Monday in October holiday. This citizens petition is not about Columbus at all. Columbus Day is and will remain a federal and state holiday. This petition doesn't change that. It doesn't even address it because it's not about Columbus and whether he's worthy of celebration. There will always be people who believe he is worthy of celebration, and there will be people who believe he is not. It is not about whether Columbus Day should be a holiday. It is and remains that. The petition does not take away, replace, or alter Columbus Day as a holiday. This petition is about the recognition of the existence, the importance, and the role of the Indigenous people who inhabited this land before us, before colonization, before westward expansion. And as a town, we will recognize that Indigenous people, their societies, and their cultures had value and continue to have value despite fewer living here now. I believe it honors the perseverance of Indigenous people despite their suffering at the hands of European colonists who overtook inhabited lands and committed genocide of Indigenous people. I believe it's a way of honoring the Indigenous people whose land we sit upon as I speak. I find it's interesting that in all the debate about the town seal, that the current town seal started as one side of a commemorative coin for the 250th anniversary of Westborough's incorporation. The opposite side of the coin was the image of a young Nipmuc male in a natural setting, representing life the way it existed before the established town of Westborough. The coin at that point in time demonstrates that our town recognized the importance of remembering the Nipmuc and Indigenous persons' origins of our area. And yet today, this concept is controversial. This article intends to allow the town of Westborough to refer to the second Monday in October as Indigenous Peoples Day in recognition of the pre-existing societies and cultures and those people who still exist today on whose land we now live. Indigenous Peoples Day is our local recognition of Westborough's past heritage and the existence of a community that should be celebrated. As a friend recently said to me, there is plenty of cultural room to acknowledge Indigenous peoples. So why am I bringing it forward as a citizen's petition? In the conversation about making the change, there was much discussion about Columbus, who he was, good or bad, different historical interpretations. There was much discussion about the holiday, should it even exist? And there was much discussion about the process. Did it factor in all sides? Was it fair? Was it open? Was there enough public comment? It seems like the decision got mired down in the process, even if to the point that people said, I support the change, but the process is wrong, so we shouldn't do it. You don't need a complicated process to do the right thing. If you agree, as I believe, that recognition of Indigenous people's existence in society and culture and their role in the evolution of our area and town is important and worthy, then we don't need a complicated process to do the right thing. We simply need to say the second Monday in October is referred to as Indigenous Peoples Day. I ask you all to reflect on this and do the right thing with me. And I open it up to questions and discussion for all of you to understand why I did it this way, because I feel like it was the way that it had to happen for us to move forward in our town in a way that we can be calling it Indigenous Peoples Day. Kara, did you want to open it up to questions?
Yes, absolutely. I'll have other people step up and ask questions.
And I apologize that I'm in my car very informally. I am a one-parent road trip today. And I said 4 o'clock, I will be in my car, but I will be at your meeting.
We're happy to make it work regardless.
Thank you.
What questions do folks have for Lisa? Donna. We'll do Donna and then Ian.
So Lisa, I appreciate you bringing this forward as a citizen's petition and also for being on this meeting. So thank you. The question I have is just the petition that was signed, back in, I don't know when it was, September, October. From what I remember, it referred to that first clause of the article, but it didn't have that second clause, which says that you know, that we are changing the name from Columbus Day. I'm sorry, we're not changing the name from Columbus Day. In other words, it's just a recognition of Indigenous Peoples Day, but that we're sort of not touching the naming of Columbus Day, that will still exist. That second clause is the part that I was not familiar with. That was newer for me. Could you give me a little bit of history on where that kind of came in?
So the petition that I wrote up never had Columbus Day in it. It always said the second Monday of October, referred to as Indigenous Peoples Day.
Yes.
And the reason I really did that was because no matter what, even if the select board had voted to make the change as this committee had requested, it wouldn't have changed the fact that there was a state holiday that continued to exist called Columbus Day, and it would continue to exist as a federal holiday. And I kept thinking that if you keep adding any discussion about Columbus, we can never move forward because we can't get there. We can't get there because the wrong emphasis was made at that point. And I think it's because if you can just talk about celebrating, why celebrate Indigenous people? That would be enough, because that's the reason to do it. Not because you're replacing something, not because you're exchanging something, not because you're putting, people's perspectives into question. Because no matter what you talk about when it comes to Columbus Day, there is always going to be this matter of interpretation. And I don't know that Westborough was ready. It felt that the discussion that happened among the select board about groups that had come in to discuss it, they just didn't seem ready. And so I believe that this is a concession. This is a concession because what you guys brought forward and what I believed, and yet it felt like the town couldn't handle it, that when you only need 3 people to vote for it out of 5 who are representing town, I get that they're representing a very large population. I thought if we could get it through that way, in terms of like making it right, and in my mind, it is like a right versus wrong, then you have to take smaller steps. And so that's really what this is. It is a smaller step forward. And even though that doesn't feel great to me overall, I feel like it's achievable.
Thanks, Lisa.
So thanks, Lisa and Donna. Actually, the question and the answer address most of what I wanted to ask. But my question is this. So yes, look, I really appreciate the strategy of layering on top some sensibility about Indigenous people and not confronting those who, for reasons that I don't understand, support Columbus Day as an entity. Columbus Day as an entity is apparently going to exist, whether we proclaim it not to or not. So I really appreciate the strategy, but my question is this now. If we're not replacing it, then the perception is that we are diluting it. And can you perhaps explain to me what some of the opposition to that dilution is? What is it that people see in Columbus Day? As John Oliver said, there must be some great Italians that didn't commit genocide and enslave people. So what is the argument for?
So are you asking me what is the argument for? I want you to repeat the actual question, because I think I know what you're asking, but I just want to make sure.
Okay, so what I'm asking is this. There's opposition to what's essentially a dilution of what's the perception of Columbus Day is by layering Indigenous People Day on top of that, and not referring to Columbus Day, right? How can we address that opposition to the dilution? And in order to do that, we need to understand what what people are holding on to or want to hold on to in Columbus Day?
So, my understanding is that Italian Americans feel that the contribution towards America, is in this holiday, that some people believe that that's, really what it represents for them. And that's their experience with it. And so I don't see this as a dilution as much as I see it as an addition. This is the part of that's, even the select board talked about in terms of inclusivity, which is, does our town, are they able to include Indigenous people? And since we live on the land that was owned and, inhabited by Indigenous people, I think it's a way of celebrating and that culture that existed before we were here. And it feels right to be on that day because that day is a reminder for Indigenous people and also a reminder for me of why they're not here, that the majority are not here. And so, but I don't think it dilutes Columbus Day because Columbus Day doesn't change. The state holiday is not going to change at all. It's simply a recognition of our town that says, we really want to also celebrate Indigenous people. It's an addition rather than a dilution. I guess that's the way I look at it. And it is a perspective thing. I know Shelby and I talked about that too. It's a perspective thing because some people will always see it as, oh, this is a way of replacing it, but it doesn't. There's also no town calendar. There is no town calendar. So there's nothing for the town to really do. It's really just a recognition and a referring, but it doesn't replace the holiday. The holiday is still going to happen.
Anyone else have questions?
Thank you. Thank you for the question, by the way.
All right. Well, we got information that we need. Oh, Donna, you want to say something else? And then Shelby.
So I guess I just want to make sure that the petition that was signed is reflected on the article, because from what I saw of the petition, it only had the first clause, whereas the article has the second clause, which says that it does not change. So Lisa, I hear you. I hear you in terms of recognizing Indigenous Peoples Day and that that's an important thing. I think there's another perspective that replacing it, even symbolically by the town of Westborough, understanding that we're not changing state law, we're not changing federal law, but we are recognizing and replacing Columbus Day with Indigenous Peoples Day in the town of Westborough. That was my understanding of the article or the petition.
It doesn't say that. It doesn't say that at all. So I'm not sure if we're not reading the same thing. On
so can I just add to that, Donna? So I think that there were two kind of petitions. I think when this committee first saw and sort of, I'll call it sort of the first wave, we had a presentation by some residents, and that time period included I'm going to use the word petition. I don't know that it was, so it was a petition that included that, and it was replaced with, and that's what this committee had debated on, and then ultimately that recommendation went to the select board. When the select board voted that down, then to Lisa's point, then she sort of picked that up for the reason she stated and created a new petition that has now been certified you have to certify the signatures. So the petition number one, and I think this is a great point, so I'm glad you brought it up, was, to my knowledge, was never certified by the town clerk in terms of those signatures. So it was brought forth with hey, people care about this. This is important. We have X number of signatures, but those signatures were never certified as Westborough voters. Lisa has taken this process, different language that is in the warrant, but which is different from petition one, had those votes certified. And so that's why the petition, the article is written as it is, but it is not a replace.
I'll interject and say that after we're finished talking to Lisa, one part of our conversation today will be to understand from Kim's going to help us understand kind of what this means as far as what power does it give to whom and for what. So we'll get into the kind of nitty gritty of what that means as far as a yes, no vote or a no vote goes for that. Kim?
So now I understand. So Donna, this is a very different, so this is a separate petition and 90 plus people.
Can I interject?
signed it.
Yeah,
Just-
Kim,
I
Kim, go
just-
ahead.
Clarity from Donna. I'm sorry, when you referred to the second point, are you looking at what's printed in the article information?
Yes.
Okay, that's what I thought. So the article information, if you look at the full warrant, each article has, that's just additional information for the body. It's in the case of a citizen petition, it's not necessarily what was on the petition that was signed by voters. It's
Okay.
intended to provide some additional detail, sort of interpretation, if you will, which I can understand. I think I understand where you're going with this. It may clarify something that the signatories of the petition were not clear that this is what the intention was.
Exactly. Thank you for answering that. And that is my question, because you may find my name on that on that list. And so in going back to that, the sort of second petition that was circulated in the November timeframe, it's that sort of first clause of the article that I understood was the petition, and that would be the article. I understand now what you're saying, Kim, is the second clause in the article itself is more sort of explanatory. Okay, thank you.
So the 90 plus signatures were registered Westborough voters in order to put this on the warrant. It was specific to creating a warrant article.
Yes,
All right, I want to give an opportunity for final comments. Yeah, Kim, go ahead.
Just to clarify, so the actual article is the first, I think it's just the first sentence. It appears as a paragraph. It's the one sentence paragraph that is not italicized. That is the actual, what we would consider the article. The information is extraneous information.
Okay.
Right. It's literally the part that says the article is a non-binding resolution regarding the second Monday in October. It does not alter or change Columbus Day in any way, nor does it take it away. And so that's basically what it's saying, that there's no action required by the town. So it is simply referring. So that's why I see it more as a concession versus what your initial committee brought forward, because that didn't pass. That's like really what I was thinking about. That didn't pass, and I feel badly that it didn't. And I feel like I don't understand fully why it couldn't, but I don't know if it meant that our town wasn't ready, which makes me feel sad, but I do believe that this is a step to push us forward gently.
All right, thank you so much, Lisa, for being here. I really appreciate your just your explanation and your time.
Well, thank you for having me, and I'm still available if anyone wanted to reach out. And you know, I don't know that this will even pass, but you know what? My feeling was that it can't hurt to try and keep trying until it happens, because its time is now and it's due, and it should be a good thing for to be able to celebrate Indigenous people. So thank you so much. I appreciate it. Enjoy the rest of your days.
Thanks, Lisa. Take care.
Take care. Bye-bye.
All right. Before we jump into deliberations, I want to share with you a statement I prepared. I've given a whole lot of thought to this in the last few days, and I want to kind of start with my perspective, which just take advantage of my position as the chairperson to do that. Last year, the select board voted to reject the recommendation of this committee to formally adopt Indigenous Peoples Day in the place of Columbus Day holiday on the second Monday of October. In explanation of their vote, the opposing select board members stated concerns that ending Columbus Day to recognize Indigenous Peoples Day would be, quote, taking away from one group to give to another. Without acknowledging the ways in which honoring Columbus Day upholds the systematic oppression and destruction of Indigenous people by Columbus and the colonialists that followed his lead. Indigenous people have been forcibly moved from their native lands, were murdered in mass, and have been victim of cultural genocide at the hands of white colonialists and their ancestors for over 500 years. Their children were kidnapped and abused under a national policy that aimed to, quote, kill the Indian, save the man. In fact, the last of the Indian boarding schools established under this policy closed as recently as the 1990s. The systematic effort towards the dominance of white colonialist power began with Christopher Columbus and his followers. Most of us did not learn about this dark side of American colonialism in our school history lessons. Those of us who were educated in typical US public schools learned about the ways in which early European explorers and settlers forged the way for religious and political freedom and innovation and opportunity in the place that we now know as America. However, many of us on this committee now recognize that this was not the whole story of this nation's history. Some of us are part of this committee because we know that there are aspects of American culture and government that are rooted in oppression, designed to uphold the dominance of white people and reinforce privileges associated with education, wealth, religion, ability, gender, sexual orientation, among others. Some of us see this inequity and we want to change it. When our committee decided to look at the issue of Indigenous Peoples Day, we started by hearing from Indigenous people. In addition to talking with the founder of Indigenous Peoples Day, Massachusetts, I personally pursued my own reading and education, seeking to learn about the experiences, perspectives, and needs of Indigenous people. It was through this process of listening and education that I became confident leading this group towards the recommendation to replace the Columbus Day holiday with Indigenous Peoples Day. I understand and agree with Indigenous people in advocating that to honor Columbus is to dishonor Indigenous people. By replacing Columbus Day, we start to acknowledge our government's accountability for the atrocities committed by Columbus and other European colonialists against Indigenous people. The establishment of Indigenous Peoples Day and the replacement of Columbus Day does not undo the horrific historic acts against Indigenous people, and it does not end the institutionalized racism that negatively impacts Indigenous, Black, and other people of color daily in our society. But replacing Columbus Day with Indigenous Peoples Day does honor the rich history and perseverance of Indigenous people and openly acknowledges their suffering at the hands of European colonialists. I know that in their process of considering this committee's recommendations, the select board and I received complaints from Italian Americans in Westborough who argued, in short, that letting go of Columbus Day would dishonor the plight of Italian American immigrants in this country. But I also talked to local Italian Americans who fiercely advocated for the change to discontinue the Columbus Day holiday. Our committee's recommendation to replace the Columbus Day holiday with Indigenous Peoples Day was not intended as an erasure of history of the religious or ethnic discrimination and violence experienced by Italian Americans who do deserve our recognition and honor. It was instead an effort to give less power and attention to a man so strongly associated with the violent oppression and genocide of Indigenous people. I appreciate Lisa Edinburgh's intent with the citizen petition, as I understand it, which is to get Indigenous Peoples Day on record in Westborough in whatever way possible. However, I don't agree with this plan, which, while not about Columbus Day, leaves Columbus Day intact as a local holiday. It is not enough, as Lisa stated, to celebrate Indigenous people with a new holiday if the celebration of Columbus Day continues. If Westborough residents and select board members are not ready to embrace a formal, full replacement of Columbus Day as a local holiday, acknowledging that doesn't affect the state or federal holidays, then maybe we need to take a step back and figure out how to get Westborough ready. Our committee's original recommendation last summer included a proposal to conduct widespread community outreach and education to promote accurate information about Indigenous Peoples Day and the replacement of Columbus Day. However, I believe that we may have been remiss in suggesting that this educational campaign begin after the select board's vote on the matter. It seems that some of the individuals on the select board may benefit from more education on this issue along with the rest of Westborough. I don't know yet whether or not such an educational campaign should be led by this committee, but I am in favor of this committee at least supporting such an educational process. Today, In honor of the Indigenous people who stood long before me on this land, I strongly oppose the citizens' petition in question, which, while aiming to newly acknowledge Indigenous Peoples Day, would leave intact Columbus Day as a local holiday. I invite you, my colleagues on the Diversity and Inclusion Committee, to join me in this stance. And with that, I welcome any conversation. Sarah?
That was beautifully said. That's basically all my thoughts said very nicely. So thank you for that. I think I'm very appreciative of Lisa coming because I think she has the right, like she wants what's right and she's trying to kind of dip our feet in without upsetting too many people. And I think she does have the right idea that this could possibly work because some people aren't ready. However, at the same time, I do see all the work we did and knowing that that's still not right. And I was going to actually say the same thing. I wonder if we do oppose this, if we suggest that, you know, we do a lot of different educational things for the town and then maybe we can propose it again. But I feel both sides at the moment. Like I know that it's not exactly what we wanted, but at the same time, I'm wondering, is this our best option for right now? Even if it's not exactly what the town needs to be doing. But I'm really glad that Lisa did come for sure.
Thanks. As you all think about sort of what your thoughts are beyond that, Kim, may I ask you just to kind of give us a tutorial about when this, you know, that term non-binding resolution, like what that like I indicated, to whom does that give power or not, and what power does it give, and how might it be used or not?
Sure. So the way the article is written, it doesn't actually require any action or any change to existing, anything existing. One way to maybe that might be helpful to frame that, some other communities that have brought this change forward to town meeting have an explicit recognition of Columbus Day in either their charter or in bylaws. And changes to either of those items require a vote and approval of town meeting. Our charter and our bylaws, we don't have personnel bylaws that refer to Columbus, to the holiday as Columbus Day. So in that case, you know, that is a binding change. Whereas here, this, you know, without Columbus Day specified in our bylaws or our charter, you know, if this were to pass, the town could use this when setting policy, but there's no requirement to do so.
Thanks. Donna?
So I'm conflicted. I appreciate Lisa bringing this forward, and I supported the petition because I think citizens should be able to petition, and it's part of democracy. And I think that's a really important thing. And I appreciate that that was done here. And I'm wondering, and I'm wondering about, again, this sort of informational section that's underneath it, which really, to me, is the part that I'm struggling with, because it sort of feels like, in contrast to what was requested by Indigenous people themselves, it's a shared holiday. And that, to me, is, we need to honor people who are asking to be recognized and honor their wishes. And so that's where I'm conflicted. Kara, I think you really summed that up very, you know, very well. Thank you for that. I agree with what you said. And I think it's our responsibility in this town to provide that education, to bring people to the point where we don't need to have a compromise position, but that we can have a recognition of the importance of replacing the, you know, the celebration of Columbus. I think that's, otherwise it feels like we're not honoring the people who are requesting this. We're not honoring their wishes. That's my, sincere hope. And the article itself does do the replacing. So I'm wondering, how will we change, like, how can we get it to do what we want to honor those wishes of the Indigenous people who have requested this to be done, right? How can the article be adjusted to do that? That's my question.
So before I get to you, Shelby, let me say a few comments on that. The article itself does not imply replacing. And when I talked privately to Lisa last week to understand, she was clear that she explicitly did not come to this committee for consultation about this because she knew that she was putting forward an article that was not in sync with our recommendations, was to explicitly replace Columbus Day. What Lisa said to us today at this meeting is that her intention is to leave Columbus out of the conversation and just focus on Indigenous people. And while in theory that's lovely, to truly honor,
right,
like the wishes of Indigenous Peoples Day, Massachusetts, for example, we can't ignore Columbus Day. We have to explicitly, and recognizing that that only has so much power. Then in some ways it would be purely symbolic because there's a state and federal holiday, but that is a strong and powerful symbol in this town, and the one that this committee originally took a stance on. So just to clarify some of that for you.
I appreciate that. I also have a concern that people who signed the petition understood that this was a replacement. And,
yes.
and if this committee is not supporting this, we really need to be clear about why and communicate the full nuance of it.
Yes, agreed entirely. Shelby?
Yep, thank you. So actually, Don, I'm glad you asked that question. And Kim and Kara, if you can help me out here, there is a way that at town meeting, the language could be amended. Donna, to your point about what folks may have thought in terms of the replacement. So like any article that comes forward on town meeting floor, a voting member of the town who is attending can make a motion to amend the article, correct? Even with citizens petition, Kim?
I think depending on the scope of the amendment.
Okay, so there may be some.
Christy explained to me, I asked her that exact question the other day. She explained to me that because it's a citizens petition, it could not be amended. It can be passed upon. So that's my understanding. And please, Kim, correct me if I'm wrong. But what Christy explained to me is that the only option to change it in any way is for the petitioner to advocate to pass on a vote for the petition. Is that accurate, Kim?
Yeah, let me retract my earlier statement because this does not, with the citizens petition, it doesn't include the language. I think, Shelby, the articles that you think of typically have other language in the actual article regarding taking other action. So with citizens petitions, it's a much more narrow ability to make any changes.
Okay, yeah, it's that language or may take any other action thereon. Okay, thank you. That I just wanted to Donna's question, make sure we are all clear on that.
And just my concern, just my 2 cents on that is just kind of to Donna's earlier point, having respect for the citizen petition process. My personal opinion is I don't like to see efforts to amend a citizen petition. To me, it's, at the point at which it's on the warrant, and the point of it being on the warrant is so people have advance notice. I'm always concerned at any effort or discussion around attempts to change things can be challenging because that's happening, on town meeting floor. It doesn't give people time to, maybe more fully form an opinion of whatever the alternative being proposed may be, when and if that's allowed.
Donna.
Yeah, Kim, I agree. Thank you. I agree with that. I should clarify. I don't mean to say that I don't mean to advocate that this should be changed in this meeting. I guess I'm imagining what would we want it to say to bring our support to it. If not this, then what? What does get our full support?
I mean, at this point, sort of our actionable items are limited. But that doesn't mean that we can't, as a committee, put, a plan in place to move forward on actionable things. So if we were to voice publicly at town meeting, for example, our opposition, and we haven't voted to say that, but given that that's what I'm advocating for, it would be with the explicit caveat of, we want Indigenous Peoples Day. We support the intent behind this article. Our committee wants to support the town in making that change in a way that also replaces the Columbus Day holiday. And we recognize that there may be far more discussion and deliberation and conversation, and education that needs to happen before the town is at a place where that is likely to happen, where that's going to happen. So it'd have to be a very explicit caveat with why, and that we are willing to support actions towards that through education or whatever.
Yeah.
Let's do Sarah first.
I guess my concern with that, like if we did oppose this, my concern would be who's going to take the next step to keep the ball rolling. I feel like we've already had people in the town step up and they've been turned down. Here comes another person, steps up. If she gets turned down, who else is going to be the ones advocating? Are we going to be the ones that step up and keep the ball rolling? Or are we just going to hope that the town comes around eventually and another community member signs another petition and we just keep going? Like, I don't want us to get stuck in this rolling circle of, oh, so here comes somebody, we support them, oh, but the town's not ready. Here comes another person, town's not ready. And I think that might be kind of what she's thinking, is like, if we can at least get this part done, that doesn't mean that the next step can't be to eventually replace it completely, but it at least gets the idea in the town. Kind of like I had previously said about the schools, like the schools are already teaching Indigenous Peoples Day. So if we can just get another level somewhere and then we keep building on that instead of just completely shutting it down. I have concerns that I just don't know who, might be brave enough to keep going if we keep saying no.
So I think that is a big risk. I think it's a big risk, and we'll have to have that conversation, and we won't have that conversation today. That's not a decision we can make today about what would be our role. But I think that there needs to be some brave action. I mean, I presume that everyone on this call today is white. You may not identify as white, and if you don't, I apologize for projecting that on you. And Lisa's white, and she acknowledges that. And I keep going back to the conversations with Matoe, and Matoe has also reached out to me regarding this petition because somebody made it known to her. And I think of the Indigenous people who are pursuing this, and they are so adamant that an Indigenous Peoples Day holiday has no meaning if it is in conjunction with Columbus Day, that it truly negates the whole purpose of honoring Indigenous people and their history. And I just keep going back to that. And if that means that we're on a bit of a hamster wheel for a while in Westborough while we figure out how to change the momentum and get people on a different track, then I don't know. I think I just can't, in my own conscience, make a vote that goes against the wishes of Indigenous people. And not to say that Indigenous Peoples Day of Massachusetts speaks for every Indigenous person, and there might be Indigenous residents of Westborough who share your opinion, Sarah, you know, and Lisa's. And if so, I wish I could hear from them, because the local opinion is of the utmost importance. But without that, I'm going to go to those whose voices haven't been heard in this process. Ian?
Yeah, I agree with the point that this is kind of a net zero game. You know, we put two holidays that are directly contradictory on top of each other and it stops being a holiday. You know, maybe what we need to do is imagine the effect that the change in the school calendar has had and will have, and wait for those people to start voting and changing the climate of the town in that way. Or maybe what we need to do is to put our efforts into putting lobbying for the people that can really make a difference, our federal politicians or state politicians. You know, maybe that's where we need to go. But in the meantime, I think we need to accept that this is largely not about Columbus. This is about Italian Americans. This has got as little to do with celebrating Columbus's actions, I believe, as St. Patrick's Day has to do with celebrating St. Patrick. Maybe I'm naive and not been here long enough, but that seems to me to be the case. I don't see how the school board can make a view that is different to that of the town, but they've done that, and maybe we just need to wait for that to have effect.
I know that Shelby can speak to this as probably better than I, but in when we received a lot of feedback from people in support of Columbus Day, there was both the argument that Columbus, that the things that I've said about Columbus and his role associated with atrocities towards Indigenous people, there are people in Westborough who say that that is erroneous, that is wrong, that Columbus did not do those things. There are also people who say that regardless of Columbus, the day has special meaning for other purposes, and therefore we want to keep it. So it's a range of arguments in favor of keeping Columbus Day. It's not limited. I mean, would you agree, Shelby? I mean, in the things that we heard from the community, there was quite a range. Yeah.
Kara.
Yes, Alma.
A couple things, and so I think back on the meeting that we had with Matawi, and she was pretty adamant that they did not want to share Columbus Day. Like they didn't want to be another layer to Columbus Day. And I appreciate that. And, you know, I've said this all along that, you know, the voters in Westborough can vote and call this day whatever they want, but it's still a federal holiday. And until the federal government changes it to be something else, it's still always going to be Columbus Day. I think that we need to sort of stay in our lane for the most part, because I think to say that it's okay to add Indigenous Peoples Day on top of Columbus Day when we've heard from someone that they very definitely don't want that, and then to try and change the title of the day when we really don't, you know, the voters here and pretty much the voters everywhere really don't have the ability to legally do that because it is a federal holiday. So that's, you know, those are a couple of my concerns, that I don't want to just layer it. And I think we need to be mindful of the fact that, like I said, we can call it anything we want.
Yeah, and the idea of how it impacts the federal holiday is, from what I understand, mostly about the more municipalities and states that change the holiday, the more influential that could be on federal policy. So that's how I understand the potential influence of it being, but also acknowledging it doesn't actually do anything to change the federal holiday now.
Yeah, and I think Ian had it right. Like maybe we need to talk to our federal representatives at this point, although I don't know, they don't seem to do much down there, but I'm not sure this would be real high on the priority list at this point. So
yeah, I think I see you, Shelby. I think where we get stuck is really thinking about the scope and the limitations of the scope of this committee. And, you know, how deep do we even get into the deliberation of the holiday? And I mean, I don't know. I just, this my conscience. Is it within our scope to advocate with our federal legislators? Not really. How far do we take it on the local level? We have to work together to define that as well. Shelby.
Thanks, Kara. So a question for Kim, and then I'll put a thought out there for the group maybe to think about. So Kim, is there ever a situation where there is a federal and a state holiday, in this case, Columbus Day, and a municipality, forget Indigenous Peoples Day for a minute, but a recognized holiday, and a municipality could choose not to recognize that holiday?
It's a document I actually have in front of me that the Massachusetts Secretary of State's office publishes listing the legal holidays observed in Massachusetts. And of those legal holidays specifically, it's acknowledged that state, county, and municipal offices are closed on the days listed that are on this list. They identify the holiday, what it's referred to, as well as the date. So for example, New Year's Day, January 1st, Patriots Day, third Monday in April, Independence Day, July 4th. So these are all federal or state holidays that we are required to be closed as a municipal employer. I'm not sure where you might be going with this in terms of wearing my HR hat. If the hope is that we change how they're listed in town documents, I'm thinking collective bargaining agreements.
Mm-hmm.
I think to be crystal clear and avoid any confusion, at a minimum, I would want dates listed in the contracts. And I'll just jump back to Indigenous Peoples Day. We've heard individuals acknowledge that that's celebrated on another day in the year. So for our purposes, when we're identifying holidays, and this is tied to budgets and employee pay, I would want to be crystal clear what the date is that we mean.
So I don't know if, Kim, I don't want to put words in your mouth in terms of Indigenous Peoples Day being recognized on a different day. I don't know if you're referring to the Friday after, because that's a different day. I don't want to confuse if someone's watching this. Kara, I know you and I have talked about this. Do you want to just speak to that? Just so there's people aren't saying, well, there is a day already.
Yeah, in the same way that there's a national, I don't know what other day. I mean, there's some entity identified a day, the day after Thanksgiving, as in some honor of Indigenous people, and I don't remember what it's called, but it's not a recognized date. It's like a day of honor. It's not a holiday, I guess.
No, I thought it was Native American Peoples Day, Native American
something like that, but it's not recognized as what we think of as a holiday.
Right.
So
right.
to Kim's point, it would be like the collective bargaining agreements. Instead of saying they would get off every Columbus Day, we could say they would get off every second Monday of October. So it's explicit that there is a town recognized holiday on that day, or whatever. I hear what you're saying, Kim, that it would have to be.
Yeah. My challenge is
in line, so it doesn't conflict with the federal regulations or whatever. It'd have to be carefully worded.
Yeah.
But I mean, we're kind of not there yet. So forgive me. I right now, where we are, is, do we take a formal stance around this petition specifically? And if so, then we should get a motion and a vote, or do we not? Kim?
I do think just the earlier comments around the holidays, that is germane, because I feel like that is one of the few places in any town document where we identify Columbus Day as a holiday that actually attaches something to it, i.e., pay. And it's a different level of recognition. There's something behind that.
I see. Okay.
But so that's just I mean, at this point, that's the only thing that I can think of. Obviously, there's a school calendar that lists, and I believe they've changed how they reference the days that students don't attend. Similarly, the town, we don't have a formal town calendar, as Lisa mentioned. We do have internal documents that identify, days that town hall is closed, and we reference Columbus Day. Collective bargaining agreements reference Columbus Day as a paid holiday, but to my knowledge, that's pretty much it.
So Kim, do you know, and maybe Sarah knows, the contracts for school personnel, has it changed in the contracts to say Indigenous Peoples Day rather than Columbus Day?
I don't know, because we can't.
No.
It depends. There's a timing issue there. We can't just unilaterally change something in a contract. So if, negotiations are open, that's the opportunity to do so, to bargain with the union, but we can't just unilaterally make the change once it's adopted.
It
I was
was
just
Certainly
curious.
changed on the school calendar. So the school calendar recognises Indigenous Peoples Day. The teaching within the schools has been very effective. My daughter corrected me about Columbus Day versus Indigenous People Day. I asked her the question and she told me that it had changed now. We'd moved on. So I'm quite proud of that change that's been made within our system.
But I didn't know if, because if it had changed in the collective bargaining materials, teacher contracts and so on and so forth, if that had changed too, or just the day on the calendar.
not yet. So negotiations are open soon. And I do believe that's coming forward, but as of this year, it has not been changed yet.
Okay, well, it's only been 1 year, so, okay.
And to me, I'm sorry, my point is, in clarity around this particular day, because if Indigenous people, we have heard from others that there may be another day of the year that is recognized as Indigenous Peoples Day, whether it's, it's not a federal, it's not a legal holiday. However, my point is, that's just something to be cognizant of in, when you're putting it in a collective bargaining agreement and referring to a day off with pay as Indigenous Peoples Day. I feel it would be prudent to identify, what day we are referring to, the calendar date,
Thanks.
just to avoid any confusion.
Yeah. Shelby and then Ian.
Kim, just going back to my other question, while certainly out of scope of what we can act on today, is it possible, have you ever heard of a municipality petitioning the Secretary of State to change the name of, like through that channel versus like through a legislative channel? The municipality saying, we as a town do not want to recognize Columbus Day. And so we're petitioning, we're just not going to do it. Like, what happens if a town doesn't do that? And therefore, and also not only puts it on the calendar someplace that someone may or may not see, but changes something in the contract. So it's a two-part question. One is, can you change it in the contract and take out the Columbus Day while still referencing the second Monday? Is that allowed? Do you know of other municipalities that have done that? And the second question is, could a municipality, I'm using the word petition, but, say the Secretary of State, we're not going to do that.
So yes, and in effect, that's when town meeting votes to change bylaws, references to Columbus Day in bylaws or in a charter. Those effectively are approved through the secretary, through the state before their, final adoption. So I think that is the means by which individual communities formally.
So because we don't have it in a bylaw, doesn't mean we couldn't create a new bylaw as a town that would say, we do,
Specific bylaws that typically contain that are personnel bylaws. That's really, to my knowledge, it's limited typically to personnel bylaws where you're referencing.
Okay.
So I want to acknowledge that these are questions that voters and residents may have as this topic persists, and it may even come up at town meeting. But for the purpose of this meeting today for our committee, I want to kind of bring us back to, where do we go from here on this topic today, and let me have Ian talk first before we go there.
Yeah, I'm sorry, my question is only going to take us further from the central question, so I'll leave that for another discussion. I was going to raise the issue of perhaps circumventing this whole discussion and making the town, as part of the education process, do what's done in Australia, New Zealand, for example, where in public meetings, the Indigenous people are recognised as the previous owners of the land that we're talking about. And that, I think, is a much more immediate, repeated and valuable exercise than changing a name of a holiday that is going to just upset a proportion of the population.
I mean, I think even though you've segued away from it, I think your point is good in that there are opportunities for us to formally make changes in the culture as far as acknowledging and honoring Indigenous people and acknowledging what has happened and what hand, some of our ancestors have in that. And Indigenous people is one way, and I think it is an important way. And I'm not saying we should drop it as a topic. Obviously, I feel pretty passionately about it, but I think that to sway the culture of the town towards embracing this idea that we're not doing harm by saying farewell to Columbus Day, where it's actually something that is really wonderful for the town. And I know that's Lisa's intent behind this petition. I do. And I think that there's lots of opportunities for us to do it. But I fear that if it is done with this way, that it waters down the importance of Indigenous Peoples Day for what Indigenous Peoples Day means, separate from all the other ways in which we could honor the people who were here before us. Donna? Oh, you're on mute.
I'd like to just go back to the question of do we or don't we support this? And the question that kind of is in my mind is, what do we gain by not supporting it, and what are the missed opportunities there as well? I'm really conflicted and undecided about this personally, so I'd love to hear what other people might have to say.
Kim.
Just one of my thoughts is, Lisa acknowledged that this is a concession. And for me, that's somewhat troubling, that I feel like there may be more work to be done, and what do we lose? What do we gain? I think it gives us time to determine, what do we as a committee want to see and propose. The other piece, I feel like it's, until you read the article information, it's not clear to me what the intent of the language is. I mean, to me, it states from now, if it were approved, we would recognize and refer to the second Monday in October is Indigenous Peoples Day. So to me, that means it's no longer Columbus Day, but then the article information seems to contradict that. So that's where I feel like it's my vote in opposition is likely based on, I feel like there's some ambiguity here, and I'd like to have a more clear sense. But again, I think, Lisa bringing it forward, I absolutely respect the petition process. But I think at this point, I'm not in favor of moving it forward as written or supporting it as written.
In part, I feel a sense of obligation to let the public know, to really clarify so they understand that this does not replace Columbus Day. Because there are people who might think that they are replacing Columbus Day by giving a yes vote, but they aren't. And I want to be really clear with folks about that. Shelby?
Thanks. So to Donna's question, in the way the article is written, that's exactly my concern, because I do believe the way it's left, the way it's worded presently, it is while I'm not saying it explicitly, it is a replace. And so I go back to where I think we as a committee, myself included, probably had a misstep, and that is that education piece, sort of kind of assuming maybe that this, because of the momentum already set forth by the schools, that as a committee, as a community, excuse me, we, that this would be generally supported, maybe kind of a non-issue, and so we just go forward and we'll educate along the way, and and the change will happen. And I think what we saw, certainly what I experienced, is that we were not ready. We're not presently ready based on the current conversations that I hear. Meaning, and let me be clear, I don't think that as a community we're going to be 100% ready. Everyone's like ready to go. It's never going to happen. It just doesn't happen in life. But I think that we missed the boat with the community education piece, and really feeling like people had an opportunity to weigh in a more formal setting, and maybe that's where we go back to as part of our explanation, to not support this article, but in that explanation of that vote, should we so choose to do that, that we then make a commitment to host those sessions. We have to be prepared for what comes with those sessions, and they, I don't expect them all to be thoughtful sharing sessions, but that is part of this really tough work that we as a community have to undertake, whether it's about this or some other.
A piece of research that we didn't do, and again, hindsight is clear, but that we didn't do is kind of see what precedent was set, like what processes have been done successfully in other communities. We didn't dig deep into that. I've learned, because I'm on that DEI coalition of other leaders in other municipalities, that some municipalities have gone through pretty elaborate processes, bringing person unmuted themselves multiple times.
Okay, great.
Okay. So anyway, we could even say, if we do a message of opposition, we could say we are prepared to take a lead on education, or to start a process of community education, but not necessarily commit to what that would look like, but do some research to explore a process of public education to move this process forward. That's kind of what I would commit to. That might feel too vague for people, but I'm afraid if we box ourselves in, we might be stuck, with something that's not effective. Kim?
I'm a little concerned about even making that much of a commitment. I think that perhaps the committee, we could put on an agenda to discuss. I know we have a quorum, but we don't have the full committee here. And before committing to that at town meeting, I'd like to make sure, particularly if we're taking on if we're going to take on some other things, I just want to make sure that we don't overcommit or create a timeline that we can't stick to. And I'm just concerned about making that commitment today.
Okay. Yeah, I think our commitment can be to continue the conversation, recognizing that there is an appetite for this, there's a desire to move this forward, and we are, we haven't talked about it for a few months. We're willing to put our energy back on this topic and figure out where to go with it. Because there's all kinds of possibilities for how to go with it, but you're right, Kim, we're not going to figure that out today. Ian?
Yeah, we have many things. We've got many battles to fight that really affect directly the residents of Westborough. This is a bigger issue than we can really tackle. The whole Columbus Day thing is morally wrong. It will change with time. But is it our battle? I don't think it is. When I was at university, my student union sent out a message of solidarity and support for the North Vietnamese government. And it was just so bizarrely irrelevant. And I'm wondering if we're partly heading towards that, of tackling things that we have no influence or perhaps no business trying to make relevant to us. You know, we have usage of public facilities. We have, you know, the library and how that fits with what people are doing. I understand this is important socially, but it's bigger than this town, perhaps.
Yeah, and I think, I don't know, I mean, that's not a decision we're gonna make today, but I think that all we can do is make a commitment to continue this conversation and to explore what role we may have within our scope. And we may not, but we might, within our scope, might be to relegate to something else or to some other process. So, Donna.
I hear what we're saying. The concern that I have is that I think a lot of people supported this petition and want to support what, you know, want to support the petition at town meeting. And so I think we just need to be clear with that. So I wonder how we would go about that.
Can we move toward that direction right now?
Would you like a motion?
I would love a motion.
I can present a motion in the affirmative to support the article, and obviously and then go with a yes or a no vote on that. I mean, there's two, we can word it either way. Kinder and gentle. Petition regarding Indigenous Peoples Day.
So we have a motion. Say it again one more time, please.
A motion for the Diversity and Inclusion Committee to recommend support to town meeting of Article 35, citizen petition regarding Indigenous Peoples Day.
All right. Do I have a second?